careerlearning.com, and I am here with Nisha Trivedi. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate Nisha coming. We've had her before, and I felt this was an appropriate topic for the current age, as you might imagine. And Nisha is a certified business etiquette coach, and she's fascinating. So I think you guys are going to enjoy it. If you have any questions, just put them in the Q&A or put them in chat, and I will ask Nisha. Nisha also has a class coming up, which I will put the link in, and it is the etiquette of networking, and we have that up in a couple weeks. So actually, we have that on June 26th, 12:30 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. So please join us for that. And we have a code called Professional20 for 20% off. So with that said, Nisha, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Blake. And thanks so much for joining today. So today we're here to talk about professional etiquette in a political charged environment. So as Blake said, a very timely topic. And so there's been a lot of discourse. Oops. What is going on? Oh no, the PowerPoint's getting excited, but it's back. And there's been a lot of discourse lately about have things just has there just been more tension in society? Are people getting ruder? And there was a poll a while back, and I should note, I don't have the exact date, but this was not in the past year, but a few years ago, where people asked, are Americans ruder today than they were 20 to 30 years ago? 69% said yes. On a frequent or occasional basis, do you encounter people using their cell phone rudely? Not surprised that 89% said yes. And it's interesting how sometimes, and this is a psychological phenomenon where people are sometimes more critical of others' behavior than their own. When they were asked, have you used your cell phone in a loud or annoying manner in the past few months? People said only 8%. Although, these two numbers right here don't exactly match up. But regardless, I think that it's, there's definitely increased tensions, in society in general. And then, of course, today we're in a very, very politically charged environment. And there are countless examples of this. And when this sort of tension goes into the workplace, it can really cause what we call a cycle of incivility. So let's say people are under stress, and this could be for a variety of reasons, some having to do with political tensions, but just in general, workplaces can just be stressful, right? What that stress can cause is a loss of awareness of, your people around you, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what you're saying, the effect it's having on others. What that can do is spur incivility and just a cycle of rudeness and just increased tension in the workplace. And what that does is, of course, it causes more stress among everyone, and the cycle goes on and on. And so that's definitely a real risk, when you have a charged work environment. And then there are many consequences to this sort of workplace incivility. And what it can lead to are, big surprise, a negative work atmosphere, lost work time and focus, right? Because you're going to be focusing on the tensions, the interpersonal tensions among different people versus doing your actual work. There could be, and I should mention, these first two always happen. Sometimes in the workplace, unfortunately, people are not always held accountable, for their behavior. But when they are, let's say there could be doubts about you, right? If you're being seen as the type of person who fosters this incivility, you can have a decline in the quality of your work. This goes to number two because of lack of focus or the type of assignments you get. If you're seen as somebody who causes this sort of instability, the quality of that might decline. You might get poor evaluations and a loss of referrals. So, being kept in mind for a project or, being referred to prospective clients. So lots of consequences to incivility in the workplace, all of which detract from the work that the organization is trying to do.
One thing for anybody that's looking for the resources, just click on the resources tab. You will see it there, including a link to the class and so forth. So It's all there. Thank you.
Thank you. And so now there's an etiquette quiz. And I'd love for you to just type into the chat which one of these three options you would take. But I'll read the prompt, which is, at a business dinner, a client with whom you have a good working relationship tell you about his passion for guns and the constitutional right to bear arms. Your personal opinion is exactly the opposite of his on this issue. The client presses you for your opinion. You would, option one, join the fray. He's asked, so it's safe to answer. Option two, ignore the question and start talking about a different subject. Option three, tell him that while you do have an opinion, you're really uncomfortable talking about it here, and then offer an alternative. So I'd love for you to type into the chat.
Actually, I'll create a poll for this.
Yeah, that'd be great. That's even better, Blake.
Question, and then what's the third choice as a sort of summary? Tell them that you do.
Yeah, basically like, yeah, I have some thoughts on this, but I'm just not comfortable, and then offering an alternative, like changing the subject.
Change the subject. Got it.
Yeah. So two or three are kind of similar, but they might have it might be kind of a different approach. So
okay, save. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, two, you ignore the question entirely. Three, you sort of say, well, and then you change the subject.
Okay.
And then one is you jump right in. So tell me, and thanks for setting up the poll, Blake. Yeah, let me know.
I would for sure join the fray. I can't stop myself. It's just an overwhelming impulse. But we have a much wiser group of people here than me. I think that's absolutely right. Okay, so. We've gotten almost everybody. This is a really high participation rate.
Oh, great.
Okay, great. So I will end the poll. So we have, I'll share the results. Join the fray, 8 out of 48. Ignore the question, 6 out of 48. And change the subject, 34 out of 48.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And yeah, so this is an expert group already. And that's something that I would do as well. I would say something like, I think this is a pretty charged topic. Probably best to just leave it, but how about that game tomorrow? Something like that. Like not ignoring it. Yeah, how about those Yankees? I didn't want to tell a team in case somebody here is a Mets fan. But
Emily says it depends on the nature of your profession. It does, actually. That is entirely true. Some professions, think lawyers, they can't wait to talk about it. So there's that.
It is, and it's true, but I think when it comes to, politics, you do just have to be careful. Is it relevant, to your work at hand? Is there a case about it? If you're a lawyer, sure. Okay. But if it's something where, let's say you're working in a totally unrelated business and this just comes up, out of nowhere, as it seems to, then that's when you, I think, have to be really, really careful, since you don't want to take things off the rails. And so with controversial topics like this one, or the plethora that exist, approach things carefully. Stick to issues and facts. If you are, let's say, as was pointed out, if you are talking about this as part of your actual work. Two, avoid making it personal, right? In terms of, really, judging a person or, attacking the person, and not the views. So, really be careful that way. Three, curb your inclination to respond in kind if it becomes personal or offensive, right? So in other words, don't fight fire with fire. And remember, don't argue, if the person, let's say, keeps pressing you on the subject. No, really, you must have an opinion on guns. Keep in mind, it's tough to argue when the other person refuses to argue, right? So if you say, you know what, I'm just not going to engage, eventually they'll lose interest. So that is a way to, to handle that sort of situation. And next we're going to talk a little bit about social media, right? Because it's not always in-person interactions. And there have been times where, definitely you've probably seen personal social media posts that are politically charged. But then there are also, companies, over the years, and I see this over and over and over, that really miss the mark when it comes to, acknowledging some sort of political topic. So years ago, I believe this was in 2011, there were the uprisings in Cairo, Egypt. And there were, the hashtag Cairo was trending as people were commenting on that very charged political situation. Well, Kenneth Cole, the fashion brand, decided to take it into its own hands, not understanding exactly what's going on, and said millions are in uproar in Cairo. Rumor is they heard our new spring collection is now available online. And there was so much backlash. People were like, "What are you thinking?" Like, and they had to apologize immediately. And actually, if you want to grab this link, you'll see many examples of these types of failures, and they still seem to happen. Sometimes, maybe not necessarily on Twitter or X, but on other forums where you would think that a brand would know, this is not the time for you to jump in, and it happens. And so that is the consequence of not reading the room, when things are politically charged and, taking it as they did in a very inappropriate direction.
Mhm.
And so when you're doing social networking, not only on behalf of your company, but like, just in terms of, when you're on various social media sites like X, like Instagram, like Threads, keep in mind a few things. That one, despite privacy protections, these pages are public. Privacy settings are tricky, things change, and you never know who's going to see what, right? Just assume that everybody can see everything, no matter what your settings look like. Uh, Also, the content you post can be viewed and judged by anyone, including those in your professional life, right? I mean, there have been times in the past where I've had coworkers try to add me on Facebook, and then it's like, oh, this is tricky, because I'm not sure if I want them seeing everything, right? And that's a very valid concern. And so that's just another reason to be careful of your privacy settings, which are not a guarantee, and also being mindful of what exactly you are posting. And ultimately, you are responsible for your page and the comments or images you leave on others' pages as well. And part of why this is so important is that you want there to be a consistency, in how you're perceived. And so think about personal you versus business you. Ultimately, does your online presence, and again, not just your professional online presence, which we'll talk about in a bit, but just in general, does it match your personal brand? Because congruency equals trust. And so ask yourself, would you be comfortable if someone from work saw your Facebook page, followed you on X, spotted your comment, or read your blog, right? And again, you might have not intended them to do these things, but these privacy settings aren't guaranteed. Somebody might have seen it. Somebody who's friends with you might have shown them the comment. You just never know what's going to happen. And you don't want them seeing a post and thinking, well, this person seems so professional. And then I'm seeing this post and it's not, it's just not adding up, right? So imagine I'm a business etiquette coach. And let's say I posted something really nasty online, you might see it and think, well, wait a minute, what kind of, business etiquette coach is this? So it's where, again, you have to think about how this congruency builds trust, and a lack of congruency can really bring somebody's trust into question. And so always ask yourself, if I post this, what am I conveying about myself? Would anyone in my life be offended by the post content or tone? How will I feel if anyone at work, again, saw this post? Can't emphasize that one enough. And is this post even appropriate for social media? Or is it best shared privately with fewer people, right? So for example, maybe there's a big update in your family. You don't want them finding out about it from social media, right? Maybe they deserve to have the news shared with them in person, and then you can share more broadly, right? Same at work. Maybe there are things that they're actually best shared with your manager and some of your close coworkers, before you share it on social media. So really think about the timing and the appropriateness of posting in the first place as well. And there's some special considerations when posting on LinkedIn, right? Especially in this politically charged environment. You want to be especially careful because it's a professional networking site. Your employer is on there, your people in your professional network, prospective, future employers, potential clients, vendors, you name it. And so before posting, you really need to ask yourself, is this appropriate for your colleagues to see? Given that it's kind of a guarantee, if the LinkedIn algorithm works the way it's supposed to, that they'll see it, right? More so than any other social media chart. And, going back to today's topic, if it's politically charged, overly personal, or polarizing, I'd say just skip it, right? You don't want to take that type of risk. And so in terms of examples of a controversial LinkedIn post, there are many of them to choose from. But there's one that I saw a couple of weeks ago that I thought was, let's just say particularly interesting. And so, there are definitely times where people put, certain views on LinkedIn. And, it's not as though you can never post, something about a view about, let's say, employment or certain things. But this is an example, I believe, of taking it very, very, very far. And that's the most delicate way that I can put it. But if anybody has any reactions to this post, feel free to type them into the chat. But what I'm most interested in knowing is not just how you feel about this post, and certainly not if you agree with anything that's said here, but you know what would be the impression of this person, who of course I've blocked out of the post, but what would be, if there's like a couple words that you could use to describe this person based solely on this post, what do you think that would be? And feel free to, and I'll move on, but feel free to type that
Well,
into.
actually, why don't I create another poll? Because I'm so good at this. I can do it another one. And I'll just ask people to say what controversial post. And I'll just ask them what word they would use in that post, right?
Okay,
Describing that post, right?
that works too. Yeah, that works too.
Okay. So I'll give you guys a chance to read it while I quickly write this. Okay. Okay, save the poll. And launch the poll. Why is it not? Oh, that's because I shared the other one. Hang on.
Yeah, and in the meantime, you can think
There we
about
go.
like what comes to your mind.
Yeah. Okay,
All
good.
right, there we go. Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you, Blake.
Sure. Okay, we've got 8. I'll stop at about 20. Okay. And the answer is racist, charged, divisive, victimizing, understanding, opinionated, Kool-Aid, fascista, lacks self-control, offensive, bunch.
No. Yeah, I mean, and those are exactly, that's very much what I
Confrontational. Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's pretty much what I expected. So yeah, thank you again for setting up the poll, Blake. And that's what people will, when they see this post. Which by the way, I saw from, this person is not even in my network, right? It just popped up on my feed. And so if I were, somebody who's going to be interviewing her for the job that they're looking for, if somebody else, one of their former colleagues saw this post. I mean, think about the impression that this person is making with this, right? And this is an extreme example, but I've seen ones that sort of tiptoe into some controversial territory as well. And so next, and maybe like this is a good one for for a
Okay.
poll as well. And then this is actually yeah, more open-ended. So you can, maybe it's like one sentence that you would do, or one thing you would ask, or one thing you would do in a sentence if somebody if someone at work you work with says something to you that seems to be a microaggression, right?
And what's a good
Um,
example of a microaggression? I'm old, so sometimes these words sort of throw me.
yeah, I would say it's one where, let's say if, a microaggression is, generally when, somebody makes a comment, not something overt, but something that, suggests something potentially negative,
Uh-huh.
particularly about a particular group. Not, again, not overt, but something where it's like, wait, what did they, were they saying what I thought they said, sort of thing?
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
for example, if somebody assumed that somebody of a certain gender is in one role where they're actually in a much higher role,
Uh-huh.
or if somebody's done something that seems to be a generalization about a particular ethnic group, but
Like
again,
all aliens are green. Like, and if I'm a blue alien, that would be bad. Like that?
yeah, kind of, right?
Kind of.
But somebody, just think about it. If somebody says something, you're like, wait a minute, so how
Right.
would you handle that situation?
Okay. Let me put that out there. Okay.
And while people are waiting, so according to Oxford, microaggression is a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instant of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group. And this can be a racial, ethnic minority, or it can be, a certain gender
Sexist.
or anything
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, that counts too.
Okay, great. Well, this is longer, so it's going to take people a little longer to get to.
Sure.
I'll stop at 15. There we go. Okay. Survey says, question why they felt that way, ignore and walk away. A couple of them asked to clarify the comment. I would ask them what they mean by their statement and do it without emotion. I would speak with the person privately to explain the situation. I would ask, what do you mean? Please clarify your statement. I think a lot of people ignore it as it happened until it happened multiple times. I've found that sometimes addressing it makes it worse. Report it, address it head on, change the subject. I would ask them politely to keep it to themselves. I would ask what they meant and ask for an example.
Yeah, no, these are great. And actually, the way and there were a few people at least who answered like this is to ask them neutrally. I'm sorry, what did you mean by that? Really
Yeah,
put them on notice. And that way, if it truly actually was not a microaggression, then hey, the misunderstanding's been cleared up, great. And if it was, that puts them on notice, and then they're
right.
flustering to explain themselves, and your point has very much been made. So yes, thank you, everybody. And then in certain situations, right? Because some people responded, maybe sometimes responding will make things worse, right? Or sometimes people do walk away. And I think it's important to note that it's, sometimes not engaging is very much an option, right? It really depends on the situation, right? So, for example, let's say you're stuck in a situation where you're like, I really wonder, I feel like I really need to say something here. Maybe it's something that's more than a microaggression, right? But what if you're afraid, if I do say something, I'm going to risk getting fired. That can't happen to me. Or there's going to be retaliation or, something that makes you feel like you're not safe. Right. And so to keep in mind, one thing is that safety does always come first. And it can mean different things in different situations under different circumstances. Sometimes safety can look like not doing anything, saying, you know what, I'm not going to touch that. Safety can look like walking away and saying, you know what, I'm going to remove myself from the situation. I've attempted to say something, but I think it'll be more harm than good, and to me in particular. Sometimes safety can look like bringing the issue to proper outlets like HR to a manager in a specific situation. And I heard, somebody say that as well. And sometimes if you're like, this is a pattern of discrimination, this seemed like overt discrimination, I have something specific that I can raise to this outlet, then you do that. Or sometimes you might feel comfortable taking a stand in a way that feels right to you, in the wording that you're comfortable with, in a way that you don't feel that you'll be put in, a danger, whether that's physically or emotionally or the status of your employment. And so again, it's not always going to be the right answer each time. And there is nothing wrong with not engaging if you feel that, in your gut that it's not a good idea. And so the things to remember here, in general, in professional etiquette, right? Whether you're in a politically charged environment or not, although I think that we're going to be in one for quite a while, is that ultimately it's about three principles: consideration, respect, and honesty, right? So just remember those three always in any professional interaction that you have. And be self-aware. It's easier to see rudeness in others than yourself. There's something in psychology called, I think it's like the attribution error. When, if you behave in a way that's rude, you're able to tell yourself, oh, you know what, I was just having a bad day, or this person just pushed my buttons. If you see that in someone else, you assume the worst, like, oh, that person's being a jerk, right? And so really, take a look at yourself in the mirror before, judging others. And then when it comes to workplace interactions, when it comes to these controversial topics, whether they're in person or whether they're on social media, and whether they're on personal social media or professional social media like LinkedIn, err on the side of neutrality, right? It doesn't mean you can never discuss your views, but be very, very careful in asking yourself, what impression am I making when I post this? Should I post this or not? And if you have doubts, then skip it. Really, it's not worth it. Know your non-negotiables, which means that, going back to that last slide where it was about, taking a stand or not, there might be certain times where you're like, no, I really have to say something. And there might be other times where you're like, it's better that I don't. or it's better that I have an alternative course of action. But, just know, what are times where you feel like I have to take a stand and others where you feel that it might be best to let somebody else or to remove yourself from the situation. And this is one of the hardest lessons, I think that there is in business etiquette and in personal etiquette, which is that at the end of the day, it's about being your best. You can't control others' actions or reactions, right? You can't control that somebody, brought something up that's uncomfortable or that's politically controversial, right? That is not a choice that you made. What you can control is how do I react to it? How do I respond to it? Do I react or respond at all? And again, that's going to depend from situation to situation.
Okay. Well, one
Oh,
quick question.
mhm.
Flavia says retaliation is a common reaction when single individual complaints or targets a person in power.
When somebody targets a person in power,
Well,
retaliate.
when retaliation is a common reaction when a single person complains. So someone says something awful, let's say the microaggression example, and they said aliens are green, and then you go complain. You tell somebody in HR, for example, that they're green, and then all of a sudden they get mad at you, and then you become the enemy.
I'm not arguing with that at all. I have heard this happening, and it's terrible, but it is a thing. I think that there are there are real huge risks to that. And I think there's a few things that could work. Not always, not always. Sometimes it's actually better not to say anything and even, to try to leave the situation, being transferred to a different group, leaving the company altogether, even, a little extreme. And you shouldn't have to do that, but sometimes that is what you have to do if this is the type of environment you're in. But I think sometimes, there is a value in almost pushing back as a group, right? One person. And that's why I think you said single individual when this is, when they retaliate against someone senior, or by retaliate, what I mean is they bring up that concern, there's the retaliation to them. But when it's a group of people pushing back saying, hey, there were several of us at this meeting or several of us who have experienced this, then I think the chances are probably lesser. And again, I'm caveating all this by saying probably, not definitely, maybe this will work better if it is brought up in a group. Or,
Mhm.
if it's brought up to a trusted manager. So maybe not directly to HR, but a trusted manager. And this is where, of course, it gets hairy because, who can you trust in the workplace is also a really big question. But bringing up to them and saying, what, this is, I'm not sure how to proceed here, but this doesn't feel right. And, they are, that is why, in an ideal world, they're there to help you navigate that sort of situation so you don't have to go all the way up the chain on your own.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nisha. This is fantastic. This is Nisha's contact information if you should need to get a hold of her. We are having her teaching a class on networking etiquette at careerlearning.com on June 26th, 12:30 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And we will cover everything that you need to know about etiquette and in terms of networking. So, Nisha, thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate your being here.